So in this video, we're going to focus on what happens when we have a number next to the x inside the argument of our sine or cosine. How does that affect the graph? And so what it actually does is it changes the period. So the b affects the period of the sine or cosine function. So the thing to remember is that in the basic graph of the sine function, right? So the basic graph of the sine function looks like this. Remember, it keeps going forever, but we kind of mostly care about looking at that one period of it. And the basic graph of the cosine, again, it's a wave and it keeps going forever, and it looks like this. Remember, it's one high and one low, so positive 1 and negative 1. And then we've always been interested in just one period of it, and one period of it goes out here to 2 pi. This is pi over 2, and 3 pi over 2. And so those were those 5 main points we always cared about. In a similar fashion over here, if I look, again, this goes out here to 2 pi, pi over 2, 3 pi over 2. And again, if you look at all these points, you have that. So now what we want to do is we want to think about how that b affects these graphs. So in both of these two graphs here, the period, how long it takes for one complete wave, so where you start, right? So I start here, it takes this long to get back to kind of that same point again, to complete one iteration of the wave. It takes this long to complete one iteration of the wave, and that's called the period. And so the period is 2 pi, but when you have a number in front of the x here, that affects the period. So the period, the formula for the period, we say is 2 pi over b. So whatever the b is, that's going to affect what the period is. So for example, sketch a graph of, okay, so the first one here, y equals the sine of 4x. So this is my b. So my new period here is going to be 2 pi over b, or 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2. So what that means is now when I go to sketch this one iteration of the sine wave, so here's my generic sine wave, right? I haven't changed the amplitude, so we're still up here at 1 and still down here at negative 1. And now, rather than it taking 2 pi to get all the way out here, it takes only pi over 2. So this right over here is pi over 2. So remember, we have to say what happens to those 5 major points, right? That point, this point, this point, this point. And so now I have that point. So I need to figure out what these other places are here. And so all it's done is it's taken this length and it's split it into 4 equal sections. So if you called your period here, we'll say it's p. This here is always going to be 1/4 of p. This is always going to be 1/2 of p. This is always going to be 3/4 of p. And then this here would be p. So this point on the axis is going to be 1/4 of pi over 2, or pi over 8. This here is going to be 1/2 of pi over 2, or pi over 4. And here we're going to be at 3/4 of pi over 2, or 3 pi over 8. So you don't have to write, you need to write these parts here that I'm boxing, right? You have to figure out what they are and say what they are on the axis. You don't have to write all the other stuff, because a lot of times it's easy enough to do in our head, but... So here's another one. Y equals the cosine of 1/3 x. So again, my new period is going to be 2 pi over b. Now, b in this case is a 1/3, so I have to do keep, change, flip, right? So keep the top, change the multiplication, flip the denominator. And so now this is going to be 6 pi. Oops. So we have that one iteration of the cosine wave here. And again, we're still 1 and minus 1. And now all the way out here is 6 pi. And so here are those points we need to figure out. So again, we're splitting it into 4. So 1/4, this would be 6 pi over 4, which is 3 pi over 2. 1/2 of 6 pi is 3 pi. And then 3/4 of 6 pi would be 18 pi over 4, or both of those are divisible by 2, so 9 pi over 2. And again, the way I got these was, this was 1/4 of pi, or 1/4 of 6 pi, right? This here was 1/2 of the period, or 1/2 of 6 pi. This point here was 3/4 of the period. Oops. 3/4 of the period, or 3/4 times 6 pi. And then this here is just that period. So that's kind of the easiest way to identify the period. And then remember, you have these 5 points, and once you have these 5 points, it's easy enough to graph them.